All right, we're going to go ahead on and get started. So, first, I am going to introduce myself, even though I see some familiar names. My name is Elena Bloodworth. I am the executive director of the Black Public Defender Association, which is a section of the National Legal Aid and Defender Association. And I am excited to, have this discussion. So, first, I want to welcome everyone to The Cost of Waiting, a conversation on pretrial detention and new solutions. On behalf of NLADA and BPDA, we want to thank you for joining us for today's discussion. Today, we'll explore the human and systemic cost of lengthy pretrial detention, emerging solutions that are happening from across the country, and the role of storytelling and how it can advance criminal justice reform. During the first hour, we'll hear from advocates, public defense leaders, and legal experts, filmmakers, and we'll also have the opportunity to preview a clip from the forthcoming documentary, The Dead Zone. We will reserve the last 30 minutes for audience questions discussion. So if you have some questions, please don't worry, we will get to them. And please save them till the end because we really can't wait to hear them. I also want to note that NLADA has applied for CLE in select states. So we know we love our CLE credit. So if you're interested in seeking CLE credit, there will be a form provided in the chat at the end of the webinar that you will need to fill out. So now I'll get a chance first to introduce our panelists. First, I want to introduce you to Dwayne Lake. He is an advocate and featured participant in the Dead Zone who spent more than 6 years in jail awaiting trial before being acquitted and now works to advance reform across the South. I next get to introduce Genesis Draper. She is the Chief Public Defender for Harris County, Texas, where she leads one of the nation's largest public defender offices and is nationally recognized leader in public defense. Next, we have Chris Ruth. He's a Mississippi-based criminal defense attorney whose career began in public defense and who has dedicated his practice to representing people facing serious criminal charges. We also have Cliff Johnson, who is the director of the MacArthur Justice Center at the University of Mississippi School of Law and a leading advocate whose litigation has challenged bail practices, denial of counsel, and other systemic injustices across the South. We also have Emily Thomas. I told you all we had a lined up. She is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and co-founder of Lemon Tree Productions, who directs and produces The Dead Zone. We also have John Toner, who is a producer, impact strategist, and co-founder of Lemon Tree Productions, and also a producer of The Dead Zone, and works at the intersection of storytelling, policy, and social change. So on behalf of NLADA and BPDA, and I'm sure everyone here, thank you so much for all of you being here. Before we begin today's panel discussion, it is my pleasure to welcome one of my good friends, John Rathbing, to open us up with a few opening remarks. Jonathan is the founder of Gideon's Promise, a nationally recognized organization dedicated to strengthening public defense through training, mentorship, and leadership development. A MacArthur Genius Fellow and longtime public defender, he has helped shape a generation of public defense leaders who are committed to client-centered advocacy and equal justice. So please help me in welcoming John Rathbing to be able to, so we can have opening remarks. So I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Elena. And I've got to say, I look at this panel. I've worked with so many people on this panel, and I don't know that I have a lot to add beyond what you're going to hear from this panel. But as I was thinking about what I wanted to say, I thought back about a decade. I started my career in Washington, D.C. before moving to the South and starting to build Gideon's Promise. And about 10 years ago, I was on a trip to D.C. with my children, and we went to the National Museum of African American History, and we spent the morning sort of looking at sort of the history of racial terror in America between slavery and Jim Crow. And then we were exhausted. We grabbed lunch. The kids wanted to go to the courthouse where I started my practice, and we went to the courtroom where they do first appearance hearings. And they started calling cases, and I knew everyone in the courtroom. I knew the lawyers, I knew the judge, I knew the courtroom personnel, prosecutors. And they started calling cases, and one after the other, young black men, shackled, orange jumpsuits, would come out, and within 30 seconds to a minute, they were on to another case. And after about a half a dozen of these, my son, 10 years old at the time, turns to me and says, "Daddy, this is just like that museum." And it dawned on me that what was happening in a courtroom in the nation's capital um, looked to a 10-year-old child more like slavery or Jim Crow than anything that looked like justice. But what dawned on me even more was that there was a courtroom of criminal justice professionals who had become used to processing human beings. They didn't even recognize what this 10-year-old child recognized. And I think what that really brings me to is this idea that there are laws, there are constitutional principles, and then there is the way things work in reality. As a law professor, I teach pretrial detention. I teach students who are going to be defense lawyers and prosecutors and someday judges about cases like Stack v. Boyle and Salerno, which basically tell us that money bond is a condition of release. It should never be used to detain people. That money bond should never be set without a hearing to ensure that we understand people's financial ability to pay so they can be released. And those cases tell us that pretrial detention should be the exception and only happen after a rigorous procedural due process set of protections. And then these students go out and work in public defender offices and solicitors' offices and DA's offices, and they see that none of that law is followed. They see people brought into courtrooms and within 30 seconds to a minute giving bonds they could never pay, held without any chance of going home. They see that those folks oftentimes lose their apartments or their homes because they can't pay their rent and their mortgage. They see that their children often end up acting out in school, maybe rendered without a place to live, end up in the juvenile system. They see the very human toll on people, on families, and on communities. And I really do think about the lawyers you're going to hear from on this panel, Genesis, Chris, Elena, who I know from Gideon's Promise. I remember them when they were young public defenders. And I think what you're going to see when you hear from them is that this is a remarkable set of public defenders who have learned that being a good lawyer means we have to learn the stories of the people we serve. We have to tell those stories, and we have to force systems that have come to see people as case files. We have to force them to see the human beings their decisions impact. Emily and John, I'm grateful to you for this film because storytelling is critical to the work of public defenders. It's critical for anyone who believes in doing justice. And I really do believe that public defenders are the front line of an effort to humanize the criminal legal system by telling the stories of all of the people they serve. So I'm going to end there and just say I am eager to sit back and listen to this panel and join the audience. But I want to thank you for inviting me to say a few words. Elena, I'm going to kick it back to you. It is great to be in this space with you.
Thank you. And thank you for those kind words. And also, thank you for those powerful words. I mean, we see it all too much every single day. And we're going to get right into the discussion to be able to highlight those injustices and, really hopefully be in community together to figure out how do we ensure this doesn't continue to happen. So, with that being said, let's just jump straight into the discussion of is the presumption of innocence dead? So I know all of you, I'm sure, can answer that question. But yeah, I think I would love to hear from at least a few of you. I'm gonna let anyone on the panel be able to jump in first. I see Cliff, you I think unmuted yourself, so I'm actually gonna choose you first.
It's dead. It's dead. Um, in Mississippi. How about that? We have been moving around judicial conferences, training for public defenders, talking about the things that wrap just touched on regarding the use of bail and the pretrial detention issues we're going to talk about during this call. And I regrettably have landed on the conclusion that the presumption of innocence is something to which we give lip service. But when I talk to judges who see people in initial appearances and tell them that they've never had a guilty person in front of them, the tops of their heads blow off. They can't even imagine that they aren't in the business of meting out justice at the earliest of stages in the process. So I'll talk about this more when we describe the dead zone problem in this Mississippi, but I'm convinced that we live in a world where the political interests of detention have taken precedent over any real commitment to this cornerstone principle of our criminal legal system. And so I don't say that flippantly. I say it with sadness and real concern. But from where I sit as a civil rights lawyer and law professor in Mississippi, um, we're going to call it in Mississippi. It's dead.
And I see Genesis, you've unmuted. Do you want to speak toward that? Is it the presumption of innocence? Is that happening right now?
Sure. So yeah, I'm gonna have to be Team Cliff on this. That we love to talk about the presumption of innocence or innocent unless proven guilty because it makes us sound like a really noble and just and thorough society. But then in practice, it is virtually offensive to suggest otherwise. And, I mentioned, saying innocent unless proven guilty. I mean, I get pushback from courts when you try to change the wording, in the jury instructions that says guilty until. It's like that the answer, the question presumes the answer. So you can't say they might not ever do it. And it's like, well, you just pick it. No, th these words mean something. And so I think that, we like to hold on to the idea because it makes us feel just. But until we are actually, giving service to those words, we are actually holding those words true, that it is absolutely dead, not just in Mississippi, but definitely in Texas. And I'm gonna throw in Tennessee for good measure since that's where I started my practice.
So since we throwing in states, I gotta throw in Louisiana where I'm at. I mean, I feel like at this point, everybody needs to just start throwing them in the chat. Um, but Chris, I would also love to hear from you. Is the presumption of innocence dead? What's your thoughts on that?
I think that I think that it is dead, but I think that it's a dangerous thing uh to hold on to that. I think it's as dead as we want it to be or allow it to be. Um, just because it's dead doesn't mean we have to stop fighting to revive it. Um, because then it truly will be dead. And what gives me hope, if anything, uh, that maybe there is a murmur of life left, is things like this documentary. I talked to Emily and John, ad nauseum throughout this process about how we have uh, conditioned ourselves as a society over the last uh, at very least half or three quarters of a century to believe that it is dead, that cops are always right, prosecutors are always right, judges are always just. And we've conditioned ourselves as a society, not even knowing it, just with the media we consume, the news reports we read. We've done that to ourselves, and I think that's a big part of why we are where we are. And these stories, like are being told in this documentary, like Dwayne's story, not to speak for him, but the other side has never been told, and that's what this documentary is doing. So as long as there are people who continue to stand up and say, uh, "Damn it, we're not calling it yet," it's it doesn't look good, but give us one more heartbeat. As long as somebody can keep fighting, I think we still got hope. So it's dead, but we ain't done fighting.
You're right about that. I feel like that's why we've all got into this work, which is because we go keep on fighting. Which I heard you mention the film, so let's also go right to that. And I'm gonna go to Emily. Emily, I would love, I know we're about to play a 3 to 4 minute clip on this, about the film, but first, before we do that, I wanted to know what drew you to this story. What should we be watching in this specific clip that we're about to play? And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I began my career as a crime reporter, and it was really kind of those shorter clips you read about someone arrested, how much their bail was set. And the more I got to learn about the system, I felt like there was such an issue with how media was covering it, such a lack of depth and nuance to the coverage. And it wasn't until I worked on a story about a man who was detained after already serving his time because they weren't sure of his immigration status. And it was 20 years ago, he had served a drug crime sentence. And then he was given the option for bail set at 20,000. So it became very clear that it wasn't about safety, it wasn't about a flight risk. It came down to this wealth-based detention system. And so that really set me off on a reporting journey to understand how we got here to those statistics you just saw, where nearly 500,000 people are in this system every day. And it's estimated that 2 people die in the limbo before a verdict, waiting for trial. And so I set off really meeting a lot of people, interviewing a lot of people, and ended up finding these 4 amazing people in the film, 3 of who are here today, because I wanted to tell the story through different vantage points in the system, not just one story or one perspective, but to see, what challenges does a judge face? What does a public defender need to do their job better? And what is the experience for someone like Dwayne, what he went through? And to really use the power of storytelling to kind of disarm people's perceptions about this issue. And so I think that's a good segue to dive into the clip, which you'll see kind of introductions to each of their personal stories and get a sense for what the larger film will look like.
The presumption of innocence is what keeps the king and his soldiers from kicking your door down in the middle of the night, plucking you out of your bed or away from your home, and sending you directly to prison with no fight, no appeal, no chance to defend yourself. But I think that we have sacrificed the presumption of innocence at the altar of public safety.
A Hinds County judge threw one lawyer in jail after he says that lawyer talked too much. Courtroom arguments came when Ruth was arguing against having bond revoked for his client. A bailiff escorted Ruth to jail.
Dwayne Lake spent 6 years in a Mississippi jail accused of triple murder, and all that time was before he went to trial and was found not guilty.
A changing of the guard at Shelby County's top prosecutor. Democrat Steve Mulroy is taking over as Shelby County DA.
There are 15 criminal judges up for re-election, and despite homicides being down, some judges in Harris County are being accused of being too lenient on crimes and bail.
I think it's really important story, and I'm glad y'all are here.
October 2015, I was charged with triple homicide. I spent 6 years in jail waiting to go to trial. I was facing the ultimate penalty, death.
There are 5,500 people approximately who will spend the night in jail tonight, many of whom are pretrial detainees, and for decades and decades, those people were there without a lawyer, anybody fighting to get them out, with no time limit on indictment. How long did you say last night that you waited before you were indicted?
Almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years pretrial detention without a lawyer and no indictment. Dwayne is a central figure in this historic change to the structure of our public defender system. How that plays out, time will tell.
It's like I was already considered guilty, even though I was just charged with allegations. It was like definitely the hardest time of my life. I had 3 kids. They was 5, 4, and 3. I was married, job, dog, house, had a couple of dogs. It was like all snatched away from me.
insufficient evidence to go forward and have remand order to submit to the court.
The case should not be remanded, it should be dismissed. Mr. Horde has spent 1,634 days in pretrial confinement for this charge. And for the state to remand it and continue to hold this charge over his head is unconscionable.
I think public defenders in general are not the cog, but should be the monkey wrench in the grindstone of the criminal legal system. Whether or not I'm making an actual difference, or whether or not my client likes me, or whether or not we get an acquittal or whatever, I will be the person that stands next to that person when no one else will.
Renewed attention on rampant violence plaguing the Harris County Jail. Many people believe the loss of life is a direct consequence of too many inmates.
The pretrial jail population has just exploded in recent years. And no matter how fast we run on this hamster wheel, it continues to explode. So you have to question, is this really about detaining people who are truly dangerous, who we truly believe will be convicted, or making it as easy as possible to detain people accused of crimes?
From the bench, Judge Draper works daily to ensure that the laws and the Constitution are applied justly and fairly to everyone.
You've heard a lot in the media and on the news about what's happening in the courts, and so I'm here to tell you today, do not be fooled. Do not be convinced into voting against your own interests. I am your judge. I'm not in your community. I am your community. But I also care that the laws are applied equally and fairly to each and every one of us. And that's what wasn't happening.
Our top story now, a changing of the guard at Shelby County's top prosecutor. Democrat Steve Mulroy is taking over as Shelby County DA.
While violent crime has been rising, public confidence in the fairness of our system has fallen, particularly in the black community. I ran for DA to restore that faith.
The greatest number of the people who are languishing pretrial for 18 months or longer haven't been convicted of a crime. A significant percentage of them ultimately will be released without a conviction. And you can say, all right, well, we've released them, no harm, no foul. No, much foul, much harm.
I stayed in motherfucker long, man. No lawyer, like, they was wrong for this shit.
Are we concerned about being able to say, I'm tough? Or are we actually concerned about increasing public safety?
Do everything you can, make all the moves, all the change that you want to make while you have the seat.
They can't come out here and tell their story like this.
Ultimately, it's got to be us to decide what is just and what is not just.
I firmly believe that what the government can do to the least of us, they can and will do eventually to everyone.
Well, with that, Dwayne, I feel like you have to be the first person that we go to on this. I mean, I can't imagine. Thank you for even being willing to tell your story. I can't even imagine the trauma to you and your family, and your babies were young. I think about my 4-year-old right now. So my question for you is, can you walk us through your experience in pretrial detention? What were the reasons that they gave that you were held nearly 6.5 years, and not just the toll on your life, but your family's life, and what did that feel like? Because again, truly, I can't imagine.
How you doing? You gotta forgive me a little bit. It kind of just hearing that kind of like it sent me to a state that I try to forget about. I try to kind of like put it under the rug as far as like the emotional side of it. I mean, it was the hardest journey in my life, man. Like it really was. Like I said, I was married, had kids, I was working, I was welding, had a career, and I go from that one day to being in prison
And it wasn't just like ordinary confinement. And you spoke about the presumption of innocence. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that don't even exist. Period. Nowhere near it. And I kind of want to tell you something about that because I was thinking and I was putting a little notes. When you say presumption of innocence, I think, me personally, I think about the first initial appearance that I had, and it's preliminary hearing. It's the smallest burden of proof in the criminal justice system whatsoever. So it only takes just this little bit of information or this little bit of piece of whatever they want to say it is to accuse you of something massive, extremely massive. Excuse me. And they build on that. I was placed in jail. I was under investigation for 90 days. I wasn't allowed in the general population. All my phone calls were being monitored. I was under strict scrutiny, right? And indictment time coming around, and they tried ploys and tactics, and till they got somebody to cooperate with them, basically say what they wanted them to say in order to get out of jail. So I think that's what kind of like threw me under the bus with it. He to save himself, he kind of like sacrificed me in so many ways. But they tried to use his statement. He even refused to come and testify. So I mean, I'm kind of all over the place with it. Like I say, I'm a little bit nervous. It brought back a whole lot of memories, and it's so much stuff that happened in between time. It's 6 years, so I got 6 years worth of experience that I can tell you about, and this is just the initial, just initially being incarcerated. So anyhow, they used his statement in order to try to charge me with the crimes, I guess. And the whole time I never knew it because, I mean, I don't know. I don't know this guy. Like, you feel me? I don't know him from nobody, but they brought him in there, and it kind of all kind of makes sense. So they put me after preliminary hearing, they put me in 90-day, allegedly 90-day lockdown, right? Because of my charge. But basically what they were trying to do was send somebody in there and have him to say, oh, he told me he did this, so they can justify arresting me. I guess he was kind of non-credible, had done did some stuff like this before, but they still tried to use it. Okay, that's the only thing that they're using at this point in time that I know of, found out about later. So 2.5 years I'm in there. I'm fighting for my life. I'm fighting. Like I'm fighting. No, I was not innocent to prove guilty. I had to prove my innocence. I had to prove my innocence. And I don't know if I said that right, but I had to prove my innocence in there. I had to become a lawyer. I had to study law. I had to tell my lawyers what to say. Guys in there playing cards, messing around with guards. No, I'm fighting for my life. Like I'm trying to get home to my kids. I stayed married a couple of years after that, so I'm trying to get home to my wife. So it just year after year after year after year, it wore me down. But I'm trying to stay in good spirits. I'm trying to keep doing the right thing. I'm trying to stay positive. Trying to use my influence in a positive manner. Um, Start kind of educating myself in jail. I was getting things that other people couldn't get because their mind it wasn't there. Like if I wanted to learn law, just so happened law books started coming in, law work started coming in. So now I'm learning law to the point where guys in the jail they were like, "Hey man, they got lawyers." They were like, "Can you do this for me?" So it was a good thing. It was a bad thing, but at the same time, I lost more than I gained. I feel like that because I can never get that time back. Um, Man, these people took everything from me. My youth, my money, my vehicles, my clothes. I came home to nothing. When I say not, I didn't have a t-shirt. I came home to nothing. So that's what they took from me. Everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Every single thing took everything from me. From uh physical to mental to spiritual. And
mean, I'm healing from it, but it's still a journey. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. Like, sometimes I just get depressed out of the blue. I don't know why, but I'm pretty sure the situation had a lot to do with it, because that, I could be thinking about that at the time. But like I say, y'all forgive me if I'm all over the place, man. Yeah, man, it was a journey. I had to not only go through a physical abuse, not a mental abuse. I was kind of going through physical abuse as well because we're in a facility with mold, cold showers. I went 3 years without going outside. 3 years. I'm talking about I'm in there pale, all bright, looking like a mirror. Couldn't see myself, no mirror, dark rooms. Um, no soap. Some weeks they wouldn't even give us soap. Say, hey, we gave you a half a bar last week. Lost people. Lost my grandma. I get a call one day. Go to the phone, telling me to call home. My grandma had died. I lost my best friend in jail. So I mean, yeah, I'm. That's why I'm passionate about this because I lost so much, and I don't want the next person to lose what I've lost. So I feel like it's my duty. That's why I went through it to kind of like put my dukes up and go to war with it and start fighting it. And I'm sitting there. You know what I was thinking about when I was incarcerated? It was so monumental that I was looking for like groups, organizations, people that'll help me. I was facing the death penalty. Like these people told me that, hey, the death penalty is on the table. So now it's urgent. It's more than a necessity. It's mandatory. That I help myself or I reach out for help. And man, people like y'all, people need to know y'all exist. Like a lot of people don't even know y'all exist, man. They hide people like y'all from us. They don't let us know that you all exist because they don't want us out of this shit, man. Just being real. Forgive my language, but that's the truth. People get in there and they get stuck. I still get phone calls from guys that been in there since I was in there. So now I did my 6 years, 8 months. They got to go through their 6 years, 8 months. It's a repeated cycle. Me, I don't have the accolades that y'all have. I can't go speak to these people that y'all can speak to. That's why we got to meet in the middle. I work with guys on my end, but I work with them on a street jail basis. I try to instill in them what I've been through. You know, but at the same time, we need people like y'all pushing to get laws changed, to get things done, to get attention to the situation because it's a lot of people dying in jail. A lot of innocent people dying in jail too. And it's just not people. A lot of human beings that deserve respect and dignity are in jail suffering because one of the main things they don't have is access to a lawyer. They don't have no voice for them. I mean, I tried to do it myself. I even went as far as filing my own motions. Man, they act like I didn't even much write it. I got it, I wrote it, had it in proper form. I even got it notarized, sent one to the clerk and sent one to the judge. Never even responded, disregarded me completely. So when I speak of we, I speak of us as a people that been through these type of situations. We need to know that y'all exist, and I appreciate y'all, man. Y'all really inspire me for real, you know. But I appreciate y'all because, like I say, man, when you in a situation where it seems as if nobody cares, nobody's there, you don't have nobody write, you don't have nobody call, you don't have nobody talk to, you know, we need to know people are there for us, man. Like we really don't, we don't know that. I know now, but I didn't know it at the time. So I appreciate y'all for what y'all doing. Y'all the ones that's really making the impact. I appreciate you, Emily. I appreciate you, John. Hey, everybody, Cliff, Chris, Genesis. I appreciate all y'all. I don't know who else on here. I'm thinking it's just the six of us, but maybe more people. I really don't know, but whoever helping, whoever just even, just passing along the message, like, I appreciate y'all from the bottom of my heart. And I ain't gonna say too much else. Y'all, I give it back to you.
Well, first of all, we appreciate you. For one, I mean, I'm speaking for the entire panel and everyone on this call. The fact that you are here, that you are telling the story, that you made it through, and you're using your voice. Because I don't think anybody on this call would have blamed you for being able to go live your life and not you tell your story. Because I mean, oh my God, right? You know, and the fact that you are using this to ensure this doesn't happen to another person, I applaud you and thank you, and we appreciate you for telling your story. So I'm going to switch, gears a little bit to, let's talk about how do we ensure this doesn't happen to another person. And I'm going to actually give this question to Genesis. How, what are the top challenges facing public defenders? I know you personally, so I know you've been in this for a really long time. What are those challenges to ensure this doesn't happen to another person? But, how are we addressing, how are you maybe addressing this challenge in your office? And what do you see kind of happen across the country? And how do we kind of continue to beat the drum to ensure this doesn't happen?
Yeah, so it's definitely a tricky and multi-layered response, right? Like I could come up with a different answer every day, but I do think one of the things that Dwayne brought up is true. Those of us who are out here on the front lines of defending the Constitution, we have the absolute smallest budgets and therefore the smallest microphones, right? So the machine that wants you to operate out of fear, they have millions and millions of dollars and perpetuate these narratives of crime and make people very fearful. And so then people are willing to, overlook people's rights because they're like, well, we're saying presumption of innocence, but what we're really saying with all of our media and everything that comes out is, well, just to be on the safe side, we just gonna keep everybody, right? That's really what the messaging is. And so I would definitely, one of the things that Dwayne said was that they don't know we exist. Well, they don't. We don't have a way of telling the story. We don't have money for commercials. We don't have money for media. Most of us don't even have a communication strategy within our offices. So grateful that Emily and John are working on this film because it's really kind of the only way that these types of stories get told. We have a itty bitty communications operations here and hoping to grow it. But communications and getting the story out to the masses and these types of injustices, it's really difficult to get that messaging out. There's no one that would hear Dwayne's story and think, well, I'm okay with that happening as long as nobody wants that to happen. But what happens is people don't know it's happening, right? We hear those one-off stories on the news, like Dwayne's story ran, and we're like, oh my God, that's shocking. What it is everywhere. What it is prevalent. And so that part of the story is not getting told. And I hope that through these types of conversations and collaborations with one another, we get better about telling these stories and amplifying these stories.
Not that I didn't unmute myself. Chris, thank you. Thank you, Emily. Emily's like, I see you. Chris, what are some of those top challenges facing public defenders today? What's your thoughts on that? And how are we, challenges?
The top three is, I'll give you the top three. It's money, money, money. And I hesitate to get all off track, but we saw in the teaser there, the news line about me going to jail or whatever. That was for the afternoon. But what not a lot of people know is that was not the first time I've been to jail. I was accused of things equally as horrific as Dwayne. But the difference is I came from a privileged background with family with the resources, frankly, to make sure that I had a lawyer from day one. And the entire thing, I was bonded out, gone to trial, and was acquitted in under a year. So, and I cannot, I cannot look at that situation juxtaposed against what Dwayne went through and wonder why and come up with any answer other than money and privilege and class. As distasteful and horrible as that is to say, it is the truth. Because I had a private lawyer there working from day one. Dwayne didn't have that. Dwayne went months and years without having a lawyer, period. And then when he got a lawyer, that lawyer went somewhere else, and then another lawyer came on. And I think to another person when I was talking at the podium there in the teaser, I was talking about a gentleman by the name of Jamie Horde who spent 5 years in a detention center for just an absolutely crocked up bullshit charge of murder. I'll leave it to Emily and John whether that story gets a little more in depth in the film, but I mean, it could not have been based on any more bullshit evidence that this man spent 1,300 whatever number I said days in jail. But what was striking in that is that in the course of being represented by my office, by the public defender's office, he had half a dozen lawyers assigned to his case. And you can't and the reason for that is because those lawyers left the office because they weren't being paid enough to survive and live there and have gainful employment as public defenders, even full time in better situations than a lot of public.
I think he might be going through a rough.
Sorry. I am driving, y'all, and it is Mississippi. Sorry. Am I back?
You are back.
Sorry. Yeah, I apologize for having to do this from the road, but this is what it is. So the turnover crisis that created just, folks might as well not have a lawyer if you have that many lawyers who have to come in and read. Jamie sitting there for 5 years, and those things all boil down to money and where we as a society decide to allocate resources. I mean, it is no surprise to anyone in this chat, I'm sure, that the disparity between public defense and prosecution. So until we decide to take seriously our constitutional mandate and adequately fund lawyers who are representing people like Dwayne and representing people like Jamie Horde and countless other people that I have represented and that have gone years and years and untold decades in this state, despite being completely innocent, until we decide to allocate those resources and provide appropriate representation to folks everywhere, the problem is going to persist.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for taking us on the road. I know a million things always going on.
Sorry.
You're fine. So, to kind of piggyback a little bit off of that, of like not enough lawyers, too many people, right? Because it's not just cases. Each one of those cases is a person, a real human being. I want to go to Cliff. Cliff, can you tell us a little bit about what exactly was the dead zone and how did Dwayne's case, right, raise that awareness in his story?
Yeah, it's really interesting the way this played out, and you have to understand the particularities of Mississippi, right? I mean, you've got the poorest state in America with the highest black population in America, with a bail system that has the same presumptions as everyone else's, where very substantial money bonds are imposed in 99% of cases as a matter of course. We are one of only a small handful of states without a statewide public defender system. We're one of only 5 states with no time limit on how long someone can be detained in a jail after arrest and pre-indictment. The limit is infinity. The DA can wait as long as the DA wants to wait to bring a charge, and there is no automatic release after 90 days or 180 days or 180 years in our system. The dead zone arose from this unfortunate legal framework that existed at the time that has since been changed. I'll talk about that briefly, where folks would go into misdemeanor courts. We have way too many courts in Mississippi, and you would go into a municipal court or a justice court, and in the same court where they handle traffic tickets and misdemeanors, they handle initial appearances and preliminary hearings in felony criminal cases. In justice courts in Mississippi, by the way, you need not be a lawyer to be a judge. You only need to have a GED to preside over those justice court proceedings. And in Mississippi, we point out that justice court is neither just nor court. And those proceedings take place lightning speed with rare exceptions. Lawyers are not present at initial. I won't get into my whole spiel about how under Rothgary footnote 16, I think initial appearances in Mississippi clearly are a critical stage, but lawyers aren't at initial. And those misdemeanor lawyers then, in the vast majority of cases, waive preliminary hearing, and then they are off the case. They no longer are your lawyer. And people would sit in jail for months and years waiting for the DA to bring an indictment, and you only then got your trial counsel at arraignment. So you had a brief period of time on the front end where you had this misdemeanor lawyer who was there defending simple assaults and any misdemeanor that could result in loss of liberty. That person disappeared. Mama, the family, the client would call and say, "Hey, Joe, I need to talk about my case," and they would be quickly told, "I'm not your lawyer anymore. You'll get your lawyer after indictment." Well, when will that be? That's not up to me. That's up to the DA. And so people would go months, years, nobody to call, no lawyer. Then they get indicted. Then they go to arraignment. Then they get their trial counsel. And so that throughout that entire period, where you should be conducting investigations, interviewing witnesses, preserving evidence, making bail reduction motions, when your client could be unraveling because of mental health issues and nobody's laying an eye on them. People are, spinning into Dante's 7th level of hell, and nobody knows, and there's nobody to call, right, Dwayne? Nobody you can reach out to. And so we, for years and years, had this situation where the courts blessed a process that denied people lawyers after about the first 3 weeks following arrest until a DA decided to bring an indictment. Ultimately, we went to the Mississippi Supreme Court to have that rule changed that required that continuity of counsel, not vertical representation. What we want, of course, is lawyers appointed at initial who are going to be trying the cases. For a long list of reasons, only 6 out of 82 counties have full-time public defenders' offices. That's difficult. And so we now have a system that those misdemeanor lawyers that get appointed, they can't get off the case unless new counsel is appointed We're pushing to have trial counsel appointed as close to initial and preliminary as possible, but some counties still wait until after indictment. And the truth of the matter is, in many, many jurisdictions, you have a lawyer on paper, but that misdemeanor court lawyer who's not going to be trying your case ultimately is not working hard, and in many instances feels like it would be somehow interfering with trial counsel to do anything, so they're just a placeholder. So we have lawyers on paper in Mississippi. In many, many places, we still don't have meaningful representation after initial and before indictment. So we've got a lot of work to do on that front. I will make a pitch for something. You can see all of the indigent defense plans in Mississippi at a website we created and hosted called at MS, like the state of Mississippi, msjaildata.com. If you go to msjaildata.com, the information about pretrial detention is now dated, but you will see some analytics around pretrial detention in Mississippi. You'll see jail lists. You'll see press releases. You'll see a lot of information where you can see that we were doing this work to lift up the problem of pretrial detention. One last thing I'll say, and I'll stop. This is not as exciting as the answers you got from our other panelists about what we need in the public defender system. But one of the things we do not have is data about who's in jail and why. We have pushed hard for a statewide jail database. We know who's in prison. We know where they were convicted, when they're supposed to get out, what their offense is. We know a lot about people who are in our state prisons. Very few states, I'd be curious to know in the chat or otherwise, if any states represented on this call have a truly comprehensive pretrial detention jail database where there's one place you can go, not each county jail, one place you can go to see who's in jail, how long they've been there, and why they're there. We got close in legislative efforts, but then we had sheriffs oppose it because they thought it was going to be a treasure trove for civil rights lawyers, and they pulled it back. It's very hard to know who's in jail and why, and it's really important to have that information.
And just if I can, to just put a point on what Cliff's saying to illustrate that this is still ongoing. I am driving back right now from Northeast Mississippi, where I represented a client for whom a municipal court had set a felony preliminary hearing for what is obviously a misdemeanor amount of marijuana. So they think that because there was also a gun there, that automatically makes it a felony, which is categorically false. But what would have happened, and thank God this young man was able to bond out on a felony level bond, but what would have happened had he not, and had this not been caught, he would have gone through a felony prelim. His case would have been bound over to sit, as Cliff said, indefinitely until the DA decided to do something with it. He could have sat in Mississippi for years on what is punishable under the statutes by no more than a fine. So this is still happening, and I don't believe that is. I mean, we've talked about a lot of Mississippi because there's a lot of Mississippi faces here, but it's pervasive and it's happening all over the country.
Yeah, and let me jump in and add one more thing. It's a point that I know we all appreciate, but I have to say it, and that is this. Dwayne's willingness to share his story and to let us bring photographer in and take pictures of him and to lift him up, to bring him into the law school at the University of Mississippi, to relive this over and over again, which I've seen firsthand is difficult for him. I think Dwayne, you don't even fully understand how important it is for you to do all that you have done. It is heroic. It has helped us change the narrative in Mississippi. And I just want to say in front of all these people how grateful I am to you, and hope you understand how many lives you've changed by your willingness to be open and honest and to relive something that's very painful. So I just want to thank you again. When we reached out to Dwayne, my paralegal found him, a lawyer named Mike Carr in the Delta brought his case to our attention, and we asked a lot of Dwayne. We pushed Dwayne out front, and man, he was a gamer, and he stepped up, and it's just such a big deal what Dwayne's done. So thank you, Dwayne, for everything you've done.
I appreciate you. I appreciate y'all, Cliff. Can y'all hear me good?
We can hear you. Well, this is so I think kind of I'm going to switch gears for a little bit of the next question because you really expounded on the importance, right, of storytelling because Cliff, you said just Dwayne being able to bring his story here into us. And again, I can't imagine living it, and then I can't imagine having to relive it every single time, Dwayne. But wanted to go to John and talk about how can storytelling shift perceptions around pretrial detention.
Can you hear me okay? Great. Yeah, I think it's a great point because I think storytelling is as old as time. We all know it from sitting around the dinner table, from movies, and I think what's interesting is that when you actually look at the data around what changes people's minds, uh, stories are remembered 20 times more than a data point alone. And I think it's because when you see a statistic like we saw earlier of almost 500,000 people in pretrial detention, it seems abstract. I may not be able to actually relate to it, but when you talk about a specific person and you then actually get to know them a little bit and you understand, oh, wait, they're not just someone who's accused, they're a father, or there's someone who is a animal lover, or there's someone who has, funny quirks or is a nuanced person, then it really helps humanize a data point. And what's interesting is that that actually um, changes the chemistry in our brain around an issue. And so storytelling not only is something that is important just to be able to advocate and to share the reality of a situation, but it actually has to do with the chemistry of our brain and how we remember information. And I think that's what's been interesting over the course of this documentary is understanding how storytelling has been used from a variety of perspectives. Whether you're a prosecutor talking about a threat of crime, and we see headlines in the 10 o'clock news, which drive a lot of the narrative, or untold stories of people whose rights have been stripped and they aren't given due process, and all of the conditions that they're facing exemplified by the stories like Dwayne's. So I think what's fascinating is that the storytelling, psychology, the neurology, as well as the impact on public perception really are formative in terms of change making.
Well, 100%, because even Dwayne, as you told your story and I heard about your babies, I mean, it made me think of mine. So, Emily, a similar question, what did making the film teach you about the power of humanizing storytelling for narrative change?
Yeah, I think so much of us have built up perceptions or biases based on what we consume every day. And I think that has created this larger kind of culture of fear of the people that are accused of crimes that we see on the nightly news or we read about, and we just assume, well, they must have done something, they deserve to be there. And that's why I really wanted to take this longer form approach to the story because that isn't the case. And when you get to know someone's story or the circumstances that, got them to that courtroom or accused of a crime or just the wrong person, wrong place, that type of thing, it really disarms people. And we find, as John was saying, we have much more in common than we don't. And finding ways to create bridges and kind of break down those walls that we build up because we're so afraid. And so I think with storytelling, it is the most powerful tool we have, especially right now with such a polarized nation. And it is bearing witness. It is the seeing it of the story that makes us feel it and makes us act. And I think we're seeing that now with, these horrific ICE detentions and deaths that it's galvanizing people more around this topic. And that's what we really hope with this film as well. This is such an unseen issue because a lot of times you can't bring cameras into certain courtrooms or you can't bring, into the jail. And so being able to see behind the scenes each of their stories, what they grapple with, and then understanding what it's going to take to get out of this, I think is so crucial.
100%. Well, of course, now I hope that everyone is interested in being able to see this film and be able to learn more about it. So, John, can you tell us where can we get more information about this documentary? Where can we see it? Where can we learn more about Dwayne and how resilient he is, and what can, tell us all the information?
Yeah, well, we are very excited to share that we have what's called a Seed and Spark campaign where you can actually be part of the film. We are right now at the finishing stage of the Dead Zone. We've filmed over the course of over 3 years with the individuals, some of whom you met today. And the stories that evolve from that are really, really incredible. And so we're excited about the film now. We plan to distribute this to film festivals, to conduct community screenings, and aim to have it distributed by next year. And so the next big step for us is that we're inviting actually everyone here and others in your networks to be able to support the film, be part of the film, and really help us cross the finish line so that stories like that of Dwayne and others can really be told to the widest audience possible.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for telling this story. So, as I said, I know at the beginning of questions, we were saving questions to the end. So, this is your time. Feel free to put it on in the chat. Also, feel free to unmute yourself. Of course, I always love to see faces. So, if you could come on camera, I would love for you to. But yeah, does anyone have any questions of specific panelist or yeah, anything. And thank you, Melanie. I see what a terrific CLE. This is great. Some CLEs are boring. This wasn't. This was powerful. Anyone has a question?
I don't see or hear anyone else speaking up. My name is Hans Maverick. I'm a policy and research organizer with Grassroots Leadership in Austin, Texas. I just wanted to thank y'all for the opportunity to join y'all this afternoon and hear the stories of the people impacted, including Dwayne. We hear a lot of similar stories here in Austin, and we're working really hard to get meaningful counsel at first appearance in Travis County and throughout the rest of the counties. There's 254 in Texas. So wish us luck, and I'll definitely be following up to find out more about the release of the film. We will want to hear from you about possibly screening the film here at Grassroots Leadership Headquarters in Austin. I'm sure it would be very well received. So look forward to hearing from you all, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate today.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else has any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat. I'd be more than happy to read it.
I'm going to jump in. I'm sorry, I'm not on camera, but this was really fantastic. Thank you all for working on this issue in the film specifically. I think has the potential to actually change hearts and minds when people share their stories that way. I'm just curious if you all have anyone at the state level, like in the legislature, who you're hoping could be a target for kind of learning through the film and then maybe carrying forward some reforms, or is that naive thinking given the state of the legislature there? I'm just curious about that.
I have a thought on that, Elena. One of the things we're seeing, Leah, that's really interesting is some pretty spirited fights between counties and cities over who's going to pay the $65 a day it costs to detain these folks pre-trial. So whenever we talked about these issues in this very red state, we didn't often get a lot of compassion, right, when we talked about human rights and civil rights. So we know how to talk about this, and often we start talking about money how much it costs, the fact that if we want to talk about public safety, we can't assume that detention is what's necessary to keep us safe because nobody's doing any analysis really of whether someone's a danger to the community. We don't have real bail hearings. I suspect that in the state of Mississippi today, not a single robust, proper bail hearing took place. Chris, I could be wrong, but I'm gonna guess zero. And hundreds of bails were imposed today. Um, and so I think we hear from sheriffs quite often who say that the thing they hate most about their job is running the jail. We sue them when somebody gets beaten up, somebody dies, somebody gets denied health care. My organization sues these jails and sheriffs. We've gotten to know them quite well. They're worried about liability. They're worried about cost. They're worried about not being reimbursed by cities who put their folks in county jails. So we're using those types of issues to promote the idea that not everybody has to be in jail. We have some good trial lawyers in the state legislature, particularly amongst the Black Caucus, who are really outspoken and doing a good job of carrying the water on this. We're proud of those folks who can help explain to the non-lawyers in the legislature that we can do this and not sacrifice public safety. So we do see some allies and some opportunities, and sometimes in unlikely places.
The thing I would add to that, just really quickly, as we think about, how we get this messaging to some of our lawmakers. Um, I think, there's a lot of times we want to make our issue singular. This is a criminal justice issue, and we really need to fight for the rights of people accused, and that is true. But it's not disconnected from other things that people may be more keyed up about right now, or that may be closer to home, right? People can absolutely appreciate the dangers that come with over policing and lack of body cameras when we're talking about these ICE shootings. And people are like, wait, with no body cameras and no, representation down at immigration detention facilities, we are all connected in those fights. And so I think being willing to lean in where there's overlap for some of these issues is helpful, because what can happen is as we fight for body cameras for all, ICE agents, there are still jurisdictions out there that don't have body cameras. And so we need to jump on that bandwagon and that just become law, and then we get wrapped up in it, right? It's not always a singular issue. And so I hope that we will do a little bit more work to see where there is overlap and shared interest, because this is a civil rights issue. And so it's not surprising that a lot of these civil rights issues overlap.
And I also would like to note that, we actually went on over, NLADA went on over to Chicago where they've eliminated cash bail. And we got to see how that actually works and, all the community organizing that actually did around that. And, we actually got to see it actually play out in front of a judge and how they did the prong test to really understand if this person is an actual danger to society. So I also would encourage you, Leah, I know Leah, to, kind of look over there, they're not too far from you, of kind of what they've done to be successful. I mean, I know that's a blue state. It's a whole different, I'm in the South, so I understand it's very different in red states. I do want to highlight that. But it doesn't mean we can't take some lessons learned. So I think I have Courtney who asked in the chat. I'm trying to do a good job at keeping up with the questions. Is what is the average wait time for someone in Mississippi who is charged with a non-homicide felony pre-indictment? So I'm gonna throw it over to my Mississippi panelists.
I answered in the chat. I guessed 6 months. It's a guess because there's so many different places. But here's the thing I wanted to point out, Elena, is that we have a grand jury frequency chart at msdldata.com. Shocking. And there's many counties in Mississippi where they only convene a grand jury twice a year. So if you get arrested right after the grand jury met, you wait 6 months. And we found that some counties will skip a grand jury if they only have 2 or 3 people. They'll just make them wait another 6 months and only convene a grand jury once a year.
And to reinforce Cliff's point, it is also highly dependent on where you are. In one county around the Jackson metro area, the one county over from where Jackson is, I mean, you can expect to go to an arraignment and have a trial date and have your case resolved inside of more like 4 months, but definitely 6. But through my through the course of my practice in Hinds County, where Jackson is, I saw people with nonviolent charges regularly sit there for years. So on more occasions than I could count on both hands, had people sit there longer than the maximum sentence that the charge carried on a nonviolent crime. So it's highly county specific, and it can be tolerable or it can be really, really bad.
One of our legislators here proposed legislation last legislative session. It didn't make it all the way through, but it got more traction than I had expected it to, was that people could not be detained longer than the maximum sentence. Now that isn't great, but it's something. And so we're hoping to see that come back as well. But as films like this bring attention to it, it is perhaps a place where states are willing to start, right? So that somebody couldn't be held on a misdemeanor for 2 years, because that would exceed the maximum penalty. So these things can make a real difference. It's all about timing, right? Like this film could potentially come out right before our legislative session starts next spring, which would give that type of legislation the momentum. That's my state rep. So I will be supporting her and bringing that back up again. And we want to be able to give her all the ammunition that we can to support that type of effort.
All right, any other questions? Please drop it in the chat. Yeah. So I see, John, you unmuted wait, I seen a couple of people unmute. So John, I will go to you first, and then I'm gonna go to you, Vanetta, I believe is, okay, look, I got your name right, John.
Yeah, well, I'll mention just briefly something that we've been thinking about is that while the film itself features 3 key states, we look at Texas, Mississippi, Kentucky, and actually Florida and Tennessee as states where people are
Oh no, did John freeze?
screen in my home state, for example, of Kentucky, or in Montana, which I saw there was a chat around not having databases for jail populations there, that the themes explored in the film can be discussed at that local level. For example, the fact that people like Dwayne, who spend years pre-trial, once released, have nothing, not even an apology. And so that's something that there's these universal themes as well as some specific themes that we're hopeful can help spark that dialogue and help spark some of that change that may not be specific to the Mississippi case study of the dead zone, for example, but that can be an entry point for conversation.
John, you kind of, oh no, he's frozen again. You kind of, I wonder if he can hear me. So we didn't hear like your last little part. You kind of went off.
Sorry, apologies if I got cut off. I was trying to convey that some of the themes in the film can offer a entry point for discussion that even though we focus from states like Mississippi and the dead zone, that some of the issues raised, like lengthy pretrial detention once you're let out, unlike if you were exonerated from a crime and you spend time in prison, uh, there's no resources, there's not even an apology that can be offered. So that our vision, I think, is that in every state across the country, every county where pretrial populations are an issue, themes in the film can be a entry point for conversation around policy changes, around justice issues, that really can help fuel that change at the policy level.
And thank you, John, for that. And I do hope this sparks discussions in many states, not just the states that were highlighted. because I'm definitely going to be pushing it in Louisiana. Vanetta, I believe you were coming off mute.
Yes, thank you. Just want to tell Dwayne, thank you for sharing his story and for everyone that is participating in this. Thank you for all the work that you are doing. I have worked with some agencies here in Cleveland, Ohio, and am a member of the National Council of Negro Women that has a social justice initiative. So I encourage you to reach out to our national office that is located in DC and touch base with the social justice chair for an organization that has over 2 million members. I am definitely going to share the information regarding this film with our social justice chair here in the local area of Cleveland to see if we can host a viewing of the film once it is released and get individuals to start conversations here in Cleveland. So again, congratulations and thank you for what you are doing.
Thank you, Vanetta. Jonathan, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, so I wanted to also, Dwayne, say thank you, man. I mean, your story is so powerful, and I think for folks like me who work in this space, it's just such an important reminder that that even when things seem hopeless, there is a reason to keep pushing because ultimately, right, someone like you comes out on the other end and inspires a whole lot of folks. And also just to, I mean, obviously Chris and Genesis and Elena, who I've known for a long time, and I've known you as lawyers, law students, just newly graduated law students, and now you're leaders in this space. And Cliff, who I've known for a long time. I just want to thank everyone. But I don't know if this is a question as much as food for thought, because I think we've seen in Georgia, and I think maybe in other places where a film like this and the storytelling, maybe we can get some movement to change some legislation, to engage in some bail reform, but you still have judges and prosecutors, and sadly, sometimes defense lawyers who have become so shaped by a culture that they can't imagine anything else. And I think we need to be thinking about, and maybe folks on this panel have some thoughts about this, assuming we can get some movement on the legislative front, what are some thoughts about how defenders and allies can start pushing folks in the system who are decision makers to start shifting their mindset to something that looks more like justice when injustice has become so normalized?
Rap, I'm thinking about that too. I was thinking about, Elena, was it you that said you visited Illinois and you saw? Yeah, I think because we can't imagine that world, I think we're going to need some of the participants in those systems where they don't have money bail used in the same way. We're going to have to sponsor them on speaking tour. We're going to have to get them out there to tell that that the sky doesn't fall and it's not chaos in the streets, and that this is a system that considers public safety and you can release people and maybe convict them later once they get to trial, right? You're not giving up on prosecutions, but that the world continues to spin and this works. And I just think in a place like Mississippi, they're going to have to hear, particularly from judges and prosecutors in those systems, not just from public defenders. I'd love to be a part of helping get those people out and about on the circuit, or maybe some videos or something. But we need to be exposed to a new way of thinking.
Genesis, I saw you unmuted yourself. I'm not trying to put you on. I feel like you're about to go.
No, I think that is one of the things that makes this film to me very unique in the fact that it comes from so many different angles of the system, right? At the time of most of the filming of this, I was a judge. And so filming from that perspective of somebody who is vocalizing like I'm trying to do right, but man, the system is fighting me, right? So that people who are in this system can feel some of that kinship. That we're not saying that you were like born evil. It feels that way when I'm standing in front of you making these arguments, but you know that I know you're trying to do right, and there's a system that is fighting you, a system larger than you even realize is out there, so that they can feel some of that kinship, and then maybe feel some um, reason to acknowledge it or engage in this conversation, because sometimes people get really sensitive about, well, you don't know what it's like, and we're out here trying to move cases and make sure we keep everybody safe. It's like, yeah, that's what I was out here doing, but the system wasn't trying to do that. And to get people feeling more, to let their guard down, to be able to start to engage in these conversations. And now I'm not a judge, right? And it's crazy the time is, the process I've gone through to kind of extract myself from the trauma of having done that for 6 years, and really just trying to recalibrate to being able to even engage in the system on what for me is a more meaningful way, and extracting myself from all of the weight and oppression that was there um, during my time in the judiciary. And so I just want to be able to kind of share my experience from these different angles. And I think same, you all didn't have an opportunity to meet Steve. It's Steve, right? Like, I don't want to get his name wrong. Who is the prosecutor out of Tennessee, and kind of the pressures and the attacks that were happening with him. And so that people can really start to see that this is bigger than most of us, and that we need to pay attention to kind of what's the larger game being played.
And I will say that I think that I don't know, I think seeing places like Illinois get it done provides hope. And I could tell you, from Louisiana, it is rough. I think Mississippi right now is number one in incarceration, but we keep running a race on who's going to be first with Louisiana. And it's a terrible race. I hope we get out of it very soon. But I could tell you that, exposure, with, national programs when, I was in a courtroom carrying over 200 cases a year, right? No client advocate, one social worker for over 13,000 cases a year, being exposed to communities like Gideon's Promise and the National Legal Aid and Defender Association and the Black Public Defender Association, and seeing other people, and then we finally got our first client advocate, then we got 4 client advocates, and we didn't even have the social worker at first. It just started making me like, we don't have to do this like this, like just because we signed up to help, and to defend poor people does not mean that we ourselves have to defend poorly, like that. This does not, so I would say as well that, I'm telling my personal story of being in this position here at BPDA, and still staying here in Louisiana on purpose, to be able to hopefully bring some changes here as well. Okay. We have 5 minutes left. So is there anyone else that has any questions? I think we might have time for 1 or 2 more. Feel free to drop it in the chat, and I am more than happy to read it, or unmute yourself so we could, maybe even see your face. Going once and going twice. Well, thank you all. I know I think we were reaching, close to 50 people here from Dwayne I review, saying it was more than just 6 of us, but I didn't want to make you nervous. But thank you so much for you all being here. I know everyone has crazy busy schedules, so thank you all so much for being here. And Dwayne, I want to tell you again, thank you so much. I know we keep saying it, but like, your story is just so powerful, and none of us would be here without, I see all the hearts going up in the claps. So I just want to really just end. I see you unmuting yourself, so I don't know if you have something to say, but just thank you so much.
Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. And with that being said, I see training just put in a chat. Yes, we will provide a recording on a learning lab. I think I gave all the information. I think they dropped some information about CLE credit. I hope Justin and Ann, I'm not missing anything. I don't hear them coming on. So, with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you for just coming and being in community. I think, it's going to take us all to keep fighting this system. So, may the fight continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena.
Bye. Thank you.
Y'all have a good one.